G'day guys.
G'day.
Calvin from the Cartoon Company in New Zealand. I was sitting doing a little bit of office work one night and an email came through that had in the subject line something like 1uz-fe MF35. So a lot of emails that I get have 1uz on them, and that's kind of boring because I do lots of 1uz. Or they have 1uz conversion, 1uz swap. But this one, the MF35 caught my interest. And what's a MF35?
I know.
You know? What's an MF35?
Tractor, of course.
A tractor. You're right. So I opened the email to find photos of a Massey Ferguson tractor with a 1uz fitted. You can see how my interest might have been sparked on that one. So we had a couple of discussions. The man bought a cam belt kit off me and we discussed about the hydraulic fan pump. And since that point, he's also sent me his wiring loom. So I'm going to get into this loom. I've opened up the box. It's a Gen 2, it's a UCF 20. It's an auto and it would make a good set of instructions. However, it's not normal because a tractor with a 1uz in it is not normal. But I think I'll get it wired. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to go and look at this tractor because I'm kind of intrigued. So let me do some wiring. I'll give you a couple of little updates as I go through the loom.
That's a big vibrator.
That's a big vibrator.
Yeah. Well, it's a concrete vibrator.
It is a concrete vibrator. Yes, thanks.
Is that the first time you've been sent a loom in a vibrator box?
It is the first time I've been sent a loom in a vibrator box. Definitely a vibrator box. So what do we got in here? Alternator loom. Transmission loom. Looks to be in pretty good order actually. Oh! Speed sensor plugs are broken. Airflow meter wiring coming out randomly. UCF 20 50380, so that's the alternative one. Because there's different wiring looms for these things.
Yeah.
Don't think he'll be using the breather for the fuel tank, funnily enough. Some broken injector plugs, pretty standard. Broken idle speed control, broken coil, broken temp sensor. Easy. I'm into it. Broken igniter plugs, but the right igniters, matches their ECU. Transmission loom was really simple to do. Some new tape and 2 new sensors for each of the speed sensors. So that was really simple, and the oxygen sensor comes off the left-hand oxygen sensor. Next I need to incorporate alternator wiring, which normally runs across the front of the engine underneath and comes up onto the left-hand front of the vehicle. This one, there's nothing on the left-hand front of a tractor. There's a wheel there. I also need to run in some wires for possibly using the aircon pump as like a compressor or air source for the braking system. They run like an air brake that you need vacuum for to release the brake, like the handbrakes are vacuum off. So possibly use the aircon pump to pump up a little tank so it pulls the handbrake off. I think that's what we were talking about. There was a braking. Igniters, I think igniters on the back. Airflow meters are actually mounted on the front, in front of the plenum, between the radiator and the idle speed control unit. That's where the airflow meter is mounted. So that's going to come down this right hand side loom and pop out. So that should be okay. And fans, electric fan. Where do I run the wiring? Do I run it down the side of the chassis or do I run it with the engine loom?
big decisions to make. Maybe you could ring him and see what his plans are.
Yeah. Have another look at some photos and have a chat. I'm hammering into this loom. I finished the right hand side of the engine. This has been apart. Sub TPS has been removed. Braided up this piece, and I've put in a pair of wires for the temperature sensor, because it's going to get a gauge of some sort. So that side's all done. New injector plugs, new idle speed control, new coil, new temp sensor. And I've also run through here, I've also run the airflow meter wiring, because it sits, I think, about here in the front of the engine. The igniter wiring over here, both of the igniter plugs are stuffed. So I'm going to shorten that, and just imagine it's going to be mounted on the box behind the engine in here somewhere. And the oxygen sensor wiring is going to go under the exhaust manifold, similar that it happens on the left hand side. Working down the left hand here, going to modify that diagnostic box, put in some fan wiring, and then the engine loom's pretty much that side of things done, and we will move over to the working by the ECU. Work's progressing pretty well on this loom now. Popped it off my bench and onto my test motor, onto my test engine. So Old Yeller is a Gen 1 engine, and this loom's a Gen 2 loom. The difference is fuel rails and this rear crossover, so it doesn't bolt on, but it can just sit there. I found the remains of a front crank loom and plugged that in. On this particular loom, the hydraulic fan pump has been removed off this engine, so those two wires I'm going to use for oil pressure, which is down there. So whatever sensor it gets put into it, pretty easy to run down. For the dash, it will have aftermarket gauges fitted for the water temp as well. So I've just run 2 wires, earth and a signal if required. We're going to have a talk about this little fella here. This particular sensor is the Efi Temp Sensor, or the water temp sensor. Goes back to the ECU on the terminal THW, and the earth side, it's not polarity conscious. It doesn't matter which way around it goes. And a lot of people have problems with this particular sensor. And in all my days, I've had very few problems with them, which is really, really interesting. And it's possibly because when I prep an engine, I put a new one in. They're not a whole lot of money. And because everyone else is having problems, and I've seen this for years, and the main problem I actually see with them is they get brittle, and the plastic is totally discolored. Like this one's green. They often go like a really browny, yellowy color. They look like crap. So I just put a new one in. Hence, I have very few problems with them. There's the new one. This one's grey, as you can see. That's like an aftermarket Denso part made by Nippon Denso. It comes out of a Denso packet, but it's like a universal that will fit lots of Toyotas, fit some Suzukis, a few other cars as well, Mazdas. So if you're trying to get reliability, prepping your engine properly is really, really important. And a lot of guys let themselves down there. I do a heap of engine prep, and anybody who's doing a lot of 1UZs is going to agree that it's silly just to take an engine out that's 25 years old and expect it to be 100% reliable. So proper engine prep is so important. All right, the main reason, back to the loom. The main reason I put it on the engine is I'm changing a couple of things at the back. If we can imagine the tractor, I'm just going to walk around the tractor here. we're going to imagine that this is where the igniters normally go. Here's normally an inner guard. Well, that's nothing on a tractor. There's not an inner guard there. And the igniters would normally run down here, along the side of this loom, along the side of the cylinder head, out with the airflow meter, out to about here. Throttle body, oh, sorry, about here. Igniters over here. And this is like my tractor, there's nothing here. I'm in open space. However, behind the engine, there's a battery box here, place to mount things. So I'm going to cut the igniter wiring off, and it's going to sit in this area. The oxygen sensor wiring, I'm going to bring down the back of the engine here. And I've been doing this on a lot of looms lately, and it'll sit under there. Heat-proof covering, clip it in nice and tight. That should work really well. Someone wanted they could build a cover from this bolt here, down there, oxygen sensor running through. So I've just measured that up, put my blue marker on it, and back onto the bench, and we'll continue. The main part of the loom is actually finished. It's braided up. I have also added some fan wiring. With the fan wiring, so it's quite long and it comes out to about here. Runs along the edge of the main loom. And down, there's an earth down here on the back of the block, or cylinder head. And the other one will run externally to the main loom. Now I wouldn't normally run fan wiring in with the main engine loom. I'm always worried because of interference, especially going past the crank loom. Generally, a bit of distance is enough to help with that, and the crank wiring is shielded. So I've chosen just to put it externally. It also means that I can modify it if needed. Yeah, it also means that I can clip it on and off. If I don't quite get it right, I can change it to suit the application. And it may mean that it can come directly over to the fuse box or something like that. I also have to put an alternator loom into this engine because there is nothing. So same sort of deal, I will run it down past the oxygen sensor wiring, along the side of the engine, up to the alternator, and the control wires are going to go through that same way. So I'm back into doing a bit more wiring, and we'll give a bit more update once I've got the main part of the loom done and we're into the relays and fuses. It's a really good feeling when I'm putting on the back cover over the top of the wiring, because at that point it's kind of the last job I do as the main body of the engine loom is done, and then I move over to buy the ECU. Both new igniter plugs are done. That was really simple. I just split off each of them, taped them so they wouldn't get mixed up, cut them and crimped on the new wires. Oxygen sensor plug done, and I ordered more because this is my last pair on this engine. And I put the alternator plug on it as well. So I've run the alternator control wires down with the oxygen sensor, put this heat-proof stuff on. So if it can handle a flame, it's going to handle going underneath the exhaust manifold. And tidied up that earth. I put the new temp sensor in the bag and a fan switch. The fan switches are a really interesting conversation. Factory, the Celsius had a fan switch in the bottom of the radiator. It went back to the ECU, and then it controlled the hydraulic fan. The hydraulic fan has been removed, and hey, I really like the hydraulic fans. They work really, really well. However, often not suitable in a job like this. So we fit a fan switch. I've run the wiring through beside the diagnostic box at the front of the loom. And the fan switches range in temperature depending on where I fit them. So this particular one is a 90 to 85, and that would be ideal for a Hilux if it was put in the top tank of the radiator, but on the opposite side of the radiator itself. it is too colder, it switches on too early for the likes if it goes in the top hose or in the engine itself. In that case, I would probably move up by 5, 10 to 15 degrees on that switch in point. I'm quite happy going 98 to 105 switch on if it's located in the engine. I try to avoid the 105s, so I'm happy to go up. I try to keep it under the 100. Of course, pressurized cooling system, it boils over 100 degrees. I try to have it so it'll switch on, it'll cool the engine down, but for normal running, once you're up and driving, it sits so the fan isn't running all the time. And for that, you've got to make sure that your cooling system is up to the job. Restrictions in front of the radiator, airflow, bull bars, restrictive bumpers, and even little deflectors, little guides, air vents around that radiator area can make quite a big difference. There's a little vent underneath of a high ace van, and if that's not fitted, the temperature can be 3 to 5 degrees difference on the open road. It's just this little tiny bit of plastic. It's kind of strange, but it does its job of directing that air into the radiator. So choosing a fan switch is important that you get the right one, and it also takes it away from the driver so they don't forget to turn on the fan. So this one's where I'll start. If it runs too much all the time, then we will look at doing something different with that. Right, it is time for me to move along and work in there. I'm actually going to get my diagrams out now. I've done the rest without diagrams, but it is time to actually get some reference material. I've popped the ECU lid off just to have a very quick check of the capacitors. These are these little round cylindrical things in here. And this one looks really good. I'm still going to recommend that it gets some new capacitors in it. It's far easier to pop some new ones in before they fail and then put spooge all over the board and do damage and corrosion on the board. But for now, that one should work just fine for what we're trying to do. Just on a side note too, just because it all looks good doesn't always mean that it is 100%. With any electronics, you can have damage that you won't see. However, it's a bit of an indicator if it does look nice and clean. Over the last 15 years of working on 1uz-Fs, I've gone through and I've drawn up a lot of my own diagrams, and I've written instructions on how to wire these engines. I've taken out all the extra stuff, making it as simple and as easy to wire up these engines. And it's a constantly developing process. These are instructions which I sell, and they come with a little bit of my time. I'm going to quickly run through what you actually get with these instructions, just as a bit of an example. Now, they're shared from my Google Drive. In the case of this 20 series, here are some schematics. There's a pinout. There's a relay diagram. There's a diagram of that plug there. There's two main options with notes for a couple of others. So that means you can quickly identify wires in this. So for example, I'm looking in here and it says pin 17 is a small red black, and I quickly can trace it. It says it's TE1, so I can quickly trace it to the correct pin on the ECU to confirm that that is correct. There's a picture of the shifter. There's a picture of a start circuit. But most importantly, what it's got is a how-to. The basics, the really basic stuff of connect this wire to your relays, connect this wire to your relay, this wire on the ECU needs power, etc. And that's the really basics of it. It does expect the purchaser to have some knowledge of wiring and how a relay works and stuff like that, and then be able to utilize that information to complete the job that they want to do. And I still use this information when I'm doing these jobs myself. It also allows me to update and check that it's all correct and make any adjustments. Enough about that. Check the ECU. I'm going to pull some pins out of this area here, go through my diagrams and work out which pins can leave. The customer had already had a bit of a look at this and he's labelled up some of these. I'm thinking that the relays and fuses are going to be mounted pretty much there. Being a tractor, so I'll just have a very short loom out to plug in, and I might even use this factory plug yet. But I'm going to do a bit of work in here, and we'll do an update once I've given that a clean up and a tidy up. I've just spent a couple more hours working on this loom, and the net result is bugger all difference. It looks just like it did a couple of hours ago. And this is that part of the job where it kind of drags on. But the thought of actually getting this tractor going is kind of exciting for me. I've arranged with the owner to hopefully pop in and see him on Friday. I happen to be going to Auckland to watch a show with my daughter, and the man's not too far away from the motorway. So providing I have time, I'll be dropping this loom off and actually having a look at the tractor. It won't be running, of course. I don't have enough time to make it run, but at least we can have a bit of a look. And that'll set the mind at ease of those guys who think this is a comedy video. I am actually having a lot of trouble keeping a straight face, but I am actually working on a tractor. So a couple of hours work. I've popped some new wires into this plug. I thought I'd use that plug. I found a replacement for the other side and popped all the wires out of that. 28 pin, I've popped all the wires out of that. So these can go in the bin now. I've put my diagnostic plug in. So that's for the semicircle. So I can plug my adapter in and a dash plug. It's got a check engine light, it's got an earth, oil light, and the water temp, a tacho, and an alternator light. As with any of these looms that I do, I've also modified the engine diagnostic plug. Pretty sure they're called DLC1. So that will also allow a scan tool to be plugged in. I will go through and multimeter and double check on all that pretty soon as well. I've laid out my fuse box and relays, and I've done a little bit of a plan on what I'm going to run. On a loom like this, I have like a standard process that I work to, and then it's adapted for every single job. Most guys have got something different happening with their engine or their install, but having the base loom very similar in every case makes my life easier later on, and if anything does go wrong. Right, I'm going to get into these relays and fuses and try and bout that out, and then I can pop this loom onto the engine and make it run. I've made some really good progress on this loom. Relays and fuses are finished. I'm just running through the test procedure at the moment. I even made a little on-off switch and a start button so I can do some testing. Next thing for me to do is to plug everything together. And when I'm doing a job like this, when I'm testing, I often run 2 test lights so I can trigger stuff and test stuff. So this can sit out, the ECU can sit out there, or the relays and fuses can sit on top of it. So it's certainly not going to work without earths. So we're just going to tie this up here. And we're going to clip the earth on that side over. I'm just not going to have it sitting on the bench. Hopefully I've got some testing happening now. If I use the right switch, so this is how it turns on. It's awesome. I've got power there. So the relay is switching that I wanted it to switch. ECU's powered up. Injectors have got power. Should be a coil over here. Oh, actually, that's out. Alternator's got power. Coil is power as that one. So that's looking really, really good. I'm now going to plug in my scan tool. And we'll have a check that we can communicate. And then I'm going to throw it onto the engine and make it run. I've also put an alternator fuse and a main EFI or main fuse to the whole circuit. And I've made up a couple of looms for that. It'll make it a bit easier to fit up. So let's plug in that scan tool. With the scan tool attached, and I'm using the under bonnet connector at the moment, which I have modified. And I've said lots of times, we have to connect up, make sure we've got a check light connected. I've just used my test light. So you can see there the test light is connected and it's flashing away. And it's bringing up faults on the scan tool. Funnily enough, it's brought up an intake air temp sensor, an airflow meter, a throttle position sensor, probably because they're not attached. So it is doing its job. And I'll just double check we've got some live data as well. While I'm doing that, while that's going in, we'll check the start circuit. And this causes lots of confusion for people. The ECU does not control whether the engine cranks over or not. The start inhibit switch is down here. And I'm just going to pop a fuse in. And then people go on about tricking the ECU so it'll start. If you're doing a manual and you wire it correctly, you don't need to trick it. You just need to wire it correctly. I can hear the start relay going. We'll just go over here, check that start. Perfect. For testing purposes, I'm going to plug in an Efi Temp Sensor, and it does change the voltage. So I'm getting live data out of the connector on the engine. Now I'll move to the one inside the cabin. Just like magic, the wiring loom fell onto this engine. Gears on. Now, before you fire up an engine, you should always check it's got oil pressure. I've got the test light over here. That one. That's my oil pressure light. Do we have oil pressure? Got oil pressure. Do we have a fuel pump? No fuel pump. Fuse pipe probably is going to help. Yep. Right, fuses help. Fuel pump is here. Here's the button. Yeah, we'll fuel up now. Let's try again. She runs, fuel pump works. The oxygen sensor wiring is sitting on the exhaust. Didn't melt it though. Alternator charges, fuel pump works, engine works, it all runs. Pretty happy with that. Let's go see a tractor. She's a runner, pretty happy. There's a little issue with the check light, so I'm going to diagnose that. And then I'll load it up, put it in a box, and go to Auckland and have a look at it. I'm going there anyway tomorrow, but I really want to see this tractor in real life. When you do lots of Lexus engines, there's always going to be little things that trip you up. And I'm a bit of a stickler for having good communication. And I was a little bit concerned on this one. It was doing something a bit strange. I had communication on the bonnet or on the engine diagnostic plug on OBD1. I had both live data and I had the check light doing what it should and being able to read flash codes. On the one that's normally in the cabin, I could read live data, but I couldn't get the check light to do what it should. It said communication error. And I was a little worried. It ran an engine. It started it. I got live data, but no check light. It would flash the check light, but when it went into the scan tool, it threw its lollies and didn't work. Now the ECU is listed from 94 to 97 in Excelsior, and my scan tool's got the options for before 96 and then 96, 97. It wouldn't work on the before 96, but it works fine on the 96, 97. So even though I do these all the time, there's always new stuff to learn. It was kind of interesting. I probably should do some instructions, so the man can check it out. Even though I'm going to tell him on the day how to do it, let's do some really quick instructions. So Scott, here's your instructions. Put the loom on the engine. Connect the alternator. Plug the alternator in. Plug the ECU in. Plug the big factory plug in. Plug that plug into the ECU. This one is the main power to all the relays and fuses. Put power to that from the battery. This plug, you plug this little thing in. It's got brake lights, an earth, start, battery power, ignition switch, an accessory. You can actually I'll just leave this with you. This turns it on and off. No one starts it. In this plug, it's for the dash, check engine light. There's an earth, which I've got to write on. Oil pressure, water temperature, the earths for each of those, the tacho, and the alternator light. So run that to an alternator, a light. Over here, there's a fan trigger. Connect them to the fan switch, which is in the little bag. Connect the fan switch, doesn't matter which way around it goes. Replace the Efi Temp Sensor that everyone in the world has trouble with, but we're just going to change it. Plenty I don't have problems. Mount the airflow meter, which is probably going to be over here. That's for the water temperature gauge, whatever you use. The hydraulic fan, this one here, cut them off. That's for your oil pressure. So the blue one is the signal and the black one is the earth. I'm just running the switch at the moment, but you're putting gauges in. Push the button, make it go. Now that's easy instructions, I'm going to ring the man and do the over the phone, let's start the engine, because that'll get him excited. And then I'm going to unpack the loom, stick it in a box, go see this tractor.
At the tone, record your message.
Hey Scott, it's Calvin from the Cartoon Company. Got your wiring loom here, just have a listen to it. Woo! goes. I'll catch you tomorrow. We just happened to be in the area of the 1uz tractor, and I kind of want to see it. So we're going to call in and quickly drop the loom off and have a really quick look at it. And it makes me kind of proud to be a Kiwi when we have guys that do crazy shit like this. Because I know that we can't do this everywhere in the world, and we can kind of do, we're pretty free with our rules around cars as well, on what we can and can't do. Especially to like the guys in Australia. I talked to a few guys over there and it's just nuts what they can't do. It's kind of unfair. And I think they get kind of jealous of what we can do over here. So we'll be there in a couple of moments and we'll have a look at this tractor. Oh, here's the shed. Full of toys and tractors and trucks and a normal tractor. That's not the one we're looking at.
This is my normal tractor. Oh, that one there too. This is another one I did up a while ago.
Fantastic.
Yeah, another one up in the back shed, and that's the little one, the normal tractor.
The normal one.
Little 135.
There's a big demand, eh? I went to another shed and there was like 10 tractors in it.
Is it?
Yeah, guys. There it is. A 1uz in a Massey Ferguson 35. And this happens to be Scott.
Yeah.
You look quite sane.
Oh, I have moments.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, people say, look at this, and they say, what'd you do that for? So, because I can.
Exactly.
Because I can, yeah. After all these years, I've always wanted to do something a bit out there.
Oh, excellent. I was just worried about the tail shaft and how you'd coupled it together, because
Yes,
you've still got the donut in there, you've got a flange at the back.
Got a bearing and a seal, and so that's all full of the diff end's full of oil now.
Yep.
And so I haven't got much of a leak. It's
Oh, that'll be
coming
perfect.
from a bolt.
No, that'll be perfect.
But that's got the rubber flange still on it.
Yep.
But this here, I might just have to put a gate on there to make it a bit more safer for the air selector. Tidy that up a bit more. Yeah, I'll do.
It's not bad, eh?
Not too bad, no.
Because there's nothing on this lever at all, is there?
No.
So it's relying totally on the detents in that trans.
Yeah. But
Yeah, so probably like a push aside or something.
Yeah, that do something silly. Yeah, it's just spare.
Yeah. And it was a nice tidy motor, eh?
Yeah.
Like the loom was pretty good. Like the connectors were still getting brittle.
Yep.
And like the connectors over here, they weren't stuffed.
No.
But as soon as I went to take them apart, they were brittle.
Yep.
Oxygen sensor plugs were okay, but they, you know, they were at the end of their life.
Yep.
So that's cool. Oh, okay. So that's your idle up for your power steering.
Yep.
I've probably got one here. You could probably just run it.
Okay.
And that gives it just a little bit of idle up for power steer.
I was going to put power steering on it, but I'm going to go back to manual steering because
Okay.
I think that it's going to be light enough, and with the manual steering, I can get correction quite easily. You know,
Yep.
we want to.
Okay.
So I'm going to try that. So.
Righto.
Yeah.
Well, it's easy enough to drop the pump off.
Yep.
It means you lose your belt rope to the other side.
Yep.
I've got a little idler, just a alternator only tensioner that just runs the crank pulley, the alternator, and
yep.
the idler. So you don't actually need all the rest because you're not actually going to be using it.
If I took the power steering, could I leave the power steering on there and just loop it, just so it's?
I've never done that. No. I'm not sure if that's a great idea.
I've lost my hydraulics in the back end because I stripped it out, so I could run this round to run the linkage hydraulics. You know the linkage hydraulics.
Yep.
And I could do that.
Yeah, and of course you've got the unit to remove the hydraulic fan, so you've got that unit.
Yep.
The aircon is wired. If you want to turn it into a pump, you can.
Yep.
But you could lose that as well if you wanted.
Yeah.
The sump seems to fit okay. After you've modified the built some new chassis.
Yeah, I'm quite close here.
Yep.
So hopefully it's not going to be a problem. But I
Pipes down.
quite weak there in the chassis, but I beefed it up. It's now about 10 or 15 mil thick there.
Yeah, it's excellent. No suspension.
No.
We're not going to just let air out of the tyres. It's got what ratio diffs in it?
Oh, I don't know. But the little 35 would normally do about 25 miles an hour or about
Yeah.
30 kilometres an hour.
At how many revs though?
At probably about 2,000 revs.
You've now got 6.5.
So yeah, so we're probably going to have a capability of 80 or 100.
And of course you had a gearbox with different ratios.
Yeah,
You've got the capability to make a very fast tractor now.
yeah, I have to be a bit careful about that.
Yeah. But the radiator.
That was $50 from Redline. $50.
What were they giving them away?
There was another one there. I should have got 2 of them. It was
Shit.
out of a Falcon that they couldn't recognise it or something like that. So it was in the bargain bin.
I've allowed for 20 amps for that fan.
Yeah. Would
Okay.
I need that?
I don't think that fan's going to run more than 20 amps.
No.
So the wiring comes through. It's pretty obvious.
Is that the right way for that fan? Should it be on the front or the back?
It's probably a reversible one.
It is reversible, yeah. But
Whether you can flip that blade. Sorry.
whether to
Yeah, it's got to go this way to grab the air.
yeah. I didn't know whether to put it on the front or the back, and I thought, oh, I'll put it on the
The
back.
back is more efficient.
Is it?
But the reason the back is more efficient is you don't have this big restriction here. So when it's on the front, this becomes a restriction.
Yeah.
So the air's got to come into it, and then of course it's going to find its way around that motor.
Yeah. Did you see I did this, and you
I-
straightened me up on this, and I made this groovy little thing here.
Yeah.
A little thing there, so I got the water going up there and all the wrong way.
But it's good now. You've sorted
It's
that.
now good. Yeah, sorted that.
Cooler's good. Exhaust nice and simple.
Yep.
Sort out
And
some steering. Looks good.
Then the air intake will just sit like that. Probably need a bigger.
That's the wrong airflow meter.
Is that?
That's a VVTi airflow meter.
Is it? So what do we need to do there?
I'll get you the right one.
Okay. Yep. That'd be cool.
I think I've got to spare the correct one, but it's going to fit in the same spot.
Yep.
Okay, so that is the wrong one. That's the problem with these dismantlers when they just chuck shit around.
It certainly does some work on there. That's brand new.
Okay, so if you just want to sit that, we'll just sit that loom in place. So that kind of sits there. That's going to be way too long. I could have shortened that airflow meter right up.
Yep.
That's easy enough to do if I need to later on.
Why is it the wrong? Because that's what it came with.
It's still the wrong one. That's the 20 series VVTi. Okay, so that sort of sits like so. That loom sits there. Your alternator wiring is in here now.
Yep.
So that can flow under here nice and snug. You may want to just build a little exhaust, like a little bracket in there.
Yep.
Okay, but that flows through the alternator.
Yep.
This is the stock length. So I left that at the stock length.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, because it'll go. It pops into this.
Yep. So that's going to fit nicely. Over here, you can put a plug on for your fan.
Yep.
So that just comes out the front. So wherever you want to run that to the fan, the rest will all plug in. And then to connect it up,
Wow, that's cool.
you pretty much just plug that in. So that's the factory plug.
Holy shit. That's nice.
That plugs in.
Yeah.
Okay. And then that plugs in. So here, this fella goes somewhere.
Yep.
Wherever you want to
Yep.
mount that,
Yep.
that goes to the alternator.
Wow. Yeah.
And you can shorten that up if you want. Okay.
That's cool.
And then the other side, one of those to battery power.
Yep.
Okay. So put that in place.
Cool. Yeah.
It all clips on.
That's nice.
There's your igniters, which I
Yep.
put the igniters back here.
Oh,
So I've popped the igniters out the
Yeah.
back of, that's the trans. Sorry, that's the trans.
Yep.
The igniters are here
Yep.
now. So you can mount them somewhere up under here.
Yep. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
Okay, so that's igniters. That's real simple.
Yep.
Fuse box gets mounted somewhere.
Yep.
And pretty much with the fuse box, at the moment, you put it in and you power it up. If you put power to this
Yep.
here,
Yep.
okay, you turn that on, you push the button,
Yep.
you put that one to fuel pump,
Yep.
That plugs into the fan wiring that's coming out over here because there wasn't enough.
Yep.
So sorry. Fan is here. Here's your fan wiring. Okay.
Yep.
And it will start and go.
What was this one?
So that's your ignition on off. And that is going to be, actually at the moment that's plugged into AC.
Yep.
So if later on you want to use that AC pump,
Oh, I can turn that on off.
you can just flick that one out though. And there's another one here, which is this one,
Yep.
which is your overdrive switch. And they're both wired
Yep.
exactly the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so the same switch you just have to mimic it.
Yep.
That's fuel pump. So this is fuel pump.
Yep.
And then later on, I've actually labelled these up for you. Brake light switch, if you put a brake light switch in, an earth. That one I think is start, STA, for start power.
Yeah.
And it only needs to be a tiny switch, okay?
Yeah.
It's got a relay.
Wow.
And on this side, there's battery, permanent battery power.
Yeah.
So you can use that to power your ignition switch. It's fused.
Yeah.
There's ignition back and accessory. So that's like if you want to run your gauges and all that stuff, that will be power for your gauges. And that's an earth suitable for gauges as well.
Yeah.
And then in this one, this plug, check engine light if you want to run one.
Yep.
There's an oil in the water. So oil and water aren't terminated because you didn't know what gauges you're running, okay?
Yep.
So there's your oil and water.
Yep.
So whatever you want to do with them.
Yep.
And if we rock around the other side,
So will they run a gauge?
they are plenty to run a gauge with.
Yep.
They're your sensor signal back for your
that's
gauge. Sensor back to the gauge,
Yep.
okay? And over this side, the hydraulic fan wiring
Yeah.
switch, which is the plug right here.
Yep.
Okay, so you can unplug that. There's a black wire and a blue wire,
Yep.
and they can be run down because your oil pressure's over here. That's your switch normally,
Yep.
but you can run them down to whatever gauge sensor you want to put in there.
Yep.
You put them in there, okay?
Okay.
And if it needs only one, if it only needs a sensor, just run the sensor. If it's got two and it needs a sensor and an earth, then you've got the two wires. Okay?
So that sensor, that oil pressure sensor, I'll need to match to the gauge.
Yep. So that one will only run a light.
Oh, okay.
So if you're buying aftermarket gauges, then you put a sensor on it.
Yep.
That one will run a light.
Oh, well.
Okay? And so that's up into this wire.
Yep.
And then you've got your tacho as you wanted.
Yep.
That's a 4-cylinder tacho.
Yep.
There's the alternator light. And those are the two earths for the two gauges.
I might just sort of stick with lights and see. It doesn't have a lot of room for gauges and that sort of stuff here.
It's fine. It's in the loom.
Yeah.
If you fire it up, if you put it all together and you put fuel into it,
Yep.
just put a test light onto that switch
Yes.
to a power,
Yep.
like I do, and it show you've got oil pressure. Start it up.
Could I run a capillary? Just a
Absolutely.
oil pressure gauge?
Absolutely.
Just a manual one. Yeah.
Anything you want. So
I could keep that Ferguson one.
I've made it pretty simple there. Okay.
Cool.
So that's all simple, straightforward. And then I've given you a fan switch, which I would like. So this fan switch,
Yep.
I would normally put there,
Yes.
okay, or somewhere like there,
Yeah.
because it's a 90 to 85. So normally by the time the water gets from here up to there and across here,
Yep.
and so that's about right.
Yep.
If it comes on and stays on all the time, we can we can use a hotter one.
Yep.
Okay, but that's the nice safe one. So wherever you want to put that,
Yep.
takes nothing to take that radiator out. So, and then water temp sensor, which is a whole lot of fun to change. It's tucked down in here, but if you see your sensor,
Yep.
you can see it down there. See, it's all discoloured.
Yeah, I see that.
It's buggered.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
buggered, yeah.
So put a new one in.
Cool.
Just make it nice and reliable. People around the world have problems with that switch.
Yep.
I replaced them as when I prepped the engine. I've had about 3 fail, and I've been doing this for 15 years.
Yeah.
Go figure. You change it, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
And that one's probably not stuffed, but it's going to break.
Yeah.
So that is awesome. That is a cool tractor. So now you can make it run.
It'll be cool. Yeah.
I've had the loom running, as you heard yesterday on the phone call. So it goes.
Yeah. I've got all the bits and pieces that you sent me up to do the cam belt.
Good.
And all the idle pulleys and all that, so I'm going to be doing. I'm just going to finish that thing there, and then
Yep.
and then I'm going to get onto this.
That's awesome.
Get it done.
I'm looking forward to seeing it running.
Ready for this.
What are you going to use it for?
Well, it's just going to be sort of like develop some nice sort of safe stunts that look good.
Yep.
You know, maybe for and for the lead foot.
Oh, yep, lead foot.
It's the old.
We'll see it Leadfoot then.
There's the old roll, the crash frame that I've got for it, the old Bonza, the original one, the ugly looking sort of thing, which will be a good roll frame. So it'll, and I'm just going to leave it look like a rat tractor, you know, with the gnarly paint and shit on it.
Yep, that's proper.
That bonnet has to be cut down the middle, you see. I have to put 100 mils in there.
Oh, yes.
So it's going to make it nice and fat.
Yep.
Look, it's sort of stretch it out that way.
Okay.
Which is going to be a bit...
You've been planning. Right. Anyway, I've got to get going.
You do. Yep.
I've got a concert to get to.
Good on you, girl.
So I've got to get going, but good to meet you. Fantastic to meet you. That was awesome.
It's really
And that is fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing it going.
Yeah.